Hello everyone, I am your host Alejandro Colindres. Welcome to Series 1 of the podcast, The Road to Champagne, 13 tested principles to drive your career to success. This podcast series will benefit professionals that have room for growth in their career, especially young professionals. We will explore one principle at a time. You can see the framework in the website roadtochampagne.com. It has 3 parts: shape your mindset, build your brand, and be the driver. Today we start part 3, Be the Driver, exploring principle number 10, increase power and influence. In the past 9 episodes, we discussed what is the right mindset to have in this journey and how to build your brand. So now that you are activating these 9 principles, you are gaining momentum in your career. You are no longer stuck in first or second gear on the road to success. You are making considerable progress. This third part is about being in control of your career and its direction and continuing to develop as a leader in your field. Many people believe all they need to do is deliver results or come up with the best ideas for success to come. Wrong. Your idea is worth nothing if it is not implemented, and you won't get it implemented without convincing the right people it is the best idea. This is where power and influence come in. Yes, I know, these are touchy subjects. You might think of dirty politicians willing to do anything when you hear the word power, and it turns you off. That's not for me, you might say. My skills will pull me through. Think again. You must be well-versed in the dynamic of power and influence to grow in your field. What you use power for can be positive or negative, but power itself is not negative. It actually helps you get your genius idea become implemented with little resistance. An effective professional is one that gets the mission accomplished, even in the face of expected resistance. Let's define 2 terms. Power is the ability to change other people's behavior. It is something you possess. Influence is the mechanism or set of actions through which people use their power to change behavior or attitudes. So power is a noun, something you own, while influence is an action or a verb. The more power you have, the more influential you can be. Power and influence help you get things done in your organization. They are your friend. You need to learn how to influence others because success depends on how well you work with others and through them. The benefits of being perceived as influential and savvy in power dynamics within your organization include that you, 1, are less likely to face opposition, therefore you get things done more efficiently. 2, you build a reputation of being someone reliable who gets things done. 3, you have an easier time getting allies and followers. 4, you become better equipped to bring and lead change. And 5, you are given more stimulating challenges and opportunities. There are several actions you must take in order to increase your power and influence, which I dive into chapter 10 of the book. 1, understand the political landscape in your organization and field. Which teams have more power? Who makes the big decisions? Who is the CEO or leader listening to? Where are the best growth opportunities? 2, understand the interests of the powerful groups or departments. What are they trying to achieve, protect, or expand? How can I market my idea in a way that aligns with their interests to gain their support? And 3, understand where your team falls within the organization's power rankings. Am I in a group with power? If not, should I move to one that has more power? We can think of power along 2 axes as shown in the Road to Champagne power matrix, which I will make sure is visible in social media once this podcast is out. One axis is contextual power, which depends on where you are within your organization, the team, the position. The other axis is individual power, which depends on your abilities. Contextual power sources include being in the right team, your position in the communications network, your authority, and your control over resources. Individual power sources include your awareness of the power dynamic, your reputation and track record, focused expertise, emotional intelligence, marketability, likability, relationships, tolerance for conflict, and sharp influencing skills. What you drive will make your road trip more efficient, right? Well, if you have low individual power in a low power team, you are riding a bicycle on your road to success. If you have high individual power in a high-power team, you are driving a race car. The good news is you can increase both types of power. Personally, I've been in the 4 quadrants in different stages of my career. And I can tell you, it is more fun to be in the high quadrant, driving a race car. To help me dive into this topic, I am very excited to be joined by Professor Alison Fragale. Professor Fragale is an organizational psychologist and professor at the University of North Carolina Kenan-Flagler Business School. She is also a recognized keynote speaker who in her free time is writing a book and expanding her wine and bourbon collection. She obtained her PhD from Stanford University, focused on organizational behavior, and is a fellow McKinsey alum. She is an expert in power, influence, and negotiations. And in episode 9 lingo, she has a well-established, admirable professional brand in this topic. So I am thrilled she's sharing her insights with our audience. Professor Fragale, welcome to the Road to Champagne podcast. I am very happy to have you here. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. Thank you, Alison, for joining us. This is a very exciting topic, so I'm excited to discuss this with you. Based on your experience, why is this topic one that most professionals think they can avoid or not make a priority?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's two reasons. One is we don't like to talk about it. So
Yeah.
there's a great quote by Rosabeth Moss Kanter that's from the 1970s, and she says, "Power is America's last dirty word." And it's easier to talk about money and easier to talk about sex than it is to talk about power.
Yeah.
And that people who have it, they deny it. People who want it don't want to appear to want it. And people who use it, do so secretly. It's essentially what she says. And that's the 1970s. I don't think it's any different now. So we have this notion that it's not okay to admit that you want it. And therefore it's not part of the dialogue. People are using it, but they're not talking about it in the way they're talking about other things. I think that's one.
Yeah.
And I think the other one, in the US, we'll call it the American dream. There's a narrative, a belief. If you work hard, you can succeed. And that narrative is misinterpreted to be a myth of individualism, that if I simply do good work, that will be rewarded. And if I have to do anything else, that's suggesting that I didn't get here on my own merit, which of course is not true. But that's a value system I think a lot of people carry around.
Wow, those are powerful arguments and they make a lot of sense. I am from Latin America, and I think that in Latin America, it is even more of a taboo than in the US. I was not really exposed to this topic until I came to business school in the US. But, before that, I had spent 26 years in Latin America. And like you said, nobody really talks about it.
Absolutely.
So why must it not be avoided, but embraced by professionals trying to grow in their career?
At some point, right, often we start out in a career being an individual contributor and being rewarded for doing our work extremely well.
Yeah.
But if you succeed at that level, then you're going to get promoted. And at some point, you will no longer be an individual contributor, but you're going to become a people manager. And at that point, your job is to really develop and manage these relationships. And so you spend more time with every successive promotion and advancement throughout your career, managing more relationships of greater consequence. So a lot of times, there's that book Marshall Goldsmith wrote, "What got you here won't get you there," that the skills that were great for being an individual contributor are not solely the same set of skills. And so power and influence, one of the things I find really fascinating about them is there are a lot of things that we can outgrow as we get more senior because we can delegate those to other people. Power and influence is not on that list. In fact, it's the opposite. You do more of it because more and more of your day is relationship management.
Yeah, that's true. And the way that I envision that, Alison, is when I think of, for example, my colleagues in the IT department, right? If you have a coder or an analyst at the lower level compared to the CIO, the expectations are much different, right? The power dynamics that they need to master are totally different. When you're an analyst and you're in the lower part of the hierarchy, it's about technical skills, right? And what you can create and deliver. You don't have to worry about power. But for the CIO, like you said, it's the total opposite. It's about, negotiating with the other functions. It's about managing relationships and getting other people to follow your vision. It's not really about technical skills because you will delegate those activities to others. So that's how I envision, what you said, so that I can relate to it in a corporate world.
Absolutely. And you can't advance if you can't get comfortable with power and influence. At the same time, even at those more junior individual contributor roles, there's still a place to be able to use these skills, hone these skills, develop them well.
Yeah, maybe I exaggerated when I said they don't need it, but they need much, much less than somebody higher up. Yes, thanks for that correction. Now, Alison, can you share a story about your experiences with power and influence? Perhaps how you went about increasing your power to achieve your mission, or how you saw others do it?
Of course, yeah. This is something I think a lot about because power and status are my areas of research and speaking. So I spend a lot of my days engaged in thinking about these topics and thinking about them personally. Something I'll say here is I'll speak actually as a woman specifically because there are some gender differences that we know about in terms of power and status. And so for women, there are some liabilities of having high power. It can lead people to not like you or to see you as aggressive rather than assertive. And that's my research directly speaks to that and addresses that, is that if you come from sort of a lower status category, being female is a lower status category than being male, that then when that's coupled with power, that can change how people see us. And that is not a reason for women or anybody to avoid using their power, but it's something to be aware of in terms of how you might want to wield it and use it. And so what I do and what I could recommend to anybody, but particularly if I'm talking with women, is one way to improve my individual sources of power is to add value to other people in a way that showcases my expertise. So combining that source of likability that you would talk about of thinking about power as along with that idea of expertise. You can put sources of power together and you can develop strategies that aren't just about pulling one lever at a time, but using multiple levers. And so if I buy you coffee or wine, perhaps because you and I like wine, right? If I say I'm going to buy you wine, you're going to like me. So it's a likability source there. But if I can add value to you in a unique way, then I'm going to solve your problem. That'll make you like me. And you'll see that I have some expertise. So for example, a very low effort way that I do this is whenever I meet a new person, I always think about who do I know in my network that this person doesn't know that I could create mutual benefit from introducing these people. And so as I get to know people, right, I get to know you and I'd say, okay, it makes me think, who else would you benefit from knowing in my network, and they would also be interested to know you. When I make that connection, I'm doing two things. Oh, I gave you something of value, right? It's as valuable to you as the wine I could buy you. I gave you something of value, and I also showed you that I have some expertise and knowledge. I'm someone who's connected. I gave you something, and so I really like, for me, that strategy. And I also, something I advise everyone, but particularly women, to do, because it's a way of dealing with the power and still being other oriented, which is an expectation we have for women.
I witnessed that yesterday. I met a Kellogg alum via Zoom yesterday, and she did exactly what you said. She said, oh, let me connect you with somebody that I know in the wine industry who has written a book about champagne, who travels to the wine regions, and I'm sure you would love talking to her. And I was like, oh, wow, this is somebody that I like and I should keep in touch with her.
Absolutely. And the thing I love about power is everyone needs it. Everyone needs to build it. But there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it. And so you can still do it with authenticity in a way that makes it feel natural to you and happy, and that it's not a tactic. It's not forced. And that is something that we all have to figure out. We're talking about like senior versus junior. There was a great story that a woman told me that I met when I was doing some work for her organization. And she was young, but she had advanced to a pretty senior level in this organization. And she was talking about how she did it. And she said, the way I did it was actually at my prior company. She said they were in finance. And she said, there was an investment that our company had made that was doing terribly. And because it's doing terribly, no one wants to talk about it because no one wants to touch any of the work that doesn't bring you glory.
Yeah.
But I found that when our team would go into meetings, our clients would want to talk about this. They cared about this investment that wasn't doing well, and no one on my team had a good answer. And she said, I took it upon myself to learn everything I could about this terrible investment. I became the expert in it so that next time I was in a meeting, and I'm the junior person, right? No one's even remembering I'm there, but I'm able to answer the question. And then all of a sudden, people said, oh, she knows everything about this investment. She said, I started getting taken to every meeting. And she said that was kind of the way I could leapfrog. And then I came to this different firm where I met her, and I was able to leapfrog in my career. So even at a junior level, you can look for ways that you can add value and expertise and build those relationships.
Alison, and one clarification that I want to make, and I'm hoping you can confirm or deny it, is that power and influence is a topic that you are never too mature or too successful to ignore. I think it's something that you need to continue getting better at because you're going to have to use it almost on a daily basis. Although the focus of this podcast series is mostly for younger professionals, I think this is one episode or topic that is relevant to everybody. What's your take on that?
100% agree. In some ways, it becomes even more important because it's all about relationships. And I always say to people, I walk into rooms of leaders all the time, and I'd say, I don't even need to know what you do, but I guarantee you every single person in here has to work with and through other people to get anything done. So these kinds of tools are tools everyone needs. They are about how do we get other people to say yes when they don't have to say yes. Mm-hmm. And that's for everybody, senior, junior, doesn't matter, private sector, government, everybody.
Got it. Thank you. So how often have you seen a wonderful, super well thought out idea or proposal die because it was not supported by the right actions related to navigating the organization's power dynamic?
Well, I'd say every day, and that might be an underestimate all the time. Yeah, I think this is a huge issue, right? Ideas fail not because they're bad ideas, but because they don't have the buy-in. They fail either right off the ground or they start to launch it and it fails in implementation because they don't have the buy-in. So all the time. So I'm a faculty professor, so I have a unique job, but I still work in an organization that's full of human beings that try to influence each other. And at UNC, we have an online MBA program. We're just about to celebrate our 10th anniversary. I'm the faculty director of this program. This program is very successful. It's been great.
Awesome.
But when we started it, it was not a popular idea. When they were trying to this was a very revolutionary idea. No other business school of our caliber is doing something like this. This is risky. And there is nothing more frustrating that will make you understand power and influence than coming from the private sector and entering academia and trying to get faculty members to move, right? You have these people who are tenured, they have jobs for life, and you want them to think like entrepreneurs, and it doesn't happen. So the person that was championing this was a person from industry, but had worked, she now worked in higher ed, trying to get faculty on board, and it was falling very flat. And she, outside of work, was a good personal friend of mine. So after the meeting, I really wasn't that excited about it either. But I'm talking to her and trying to help her figure out how she can get this idea off the ground. And I said, tell me who you've talked to so far among the faculty who likes this idea. And she gave me a bunch of names. Here are the people who seem like they're on board with it. And I listened to her names. And there was one she said, and I said, you need him to be your champion. Because he is personally very well regarded and respected. He has a lot of individual sources of power and contextual power as well. And so I said, get him to do it. Now, we debate at this point. She says she was going to do it anyway. I say it was all my idea. But next thing you know, he is the ambassador of the program. He ultimately becomes the dean of the program. And now he is the dean of our business school.
Oh, wow.
And so his support was absolutely successful. If it was anybody else, I don't think this program would exist, because as soon as he was on board, everyone said, oh, now I need to pay attention to this. He's very influential. And that idea of when we have to think about power and influence, sometimes it's not that we say the right thing. It's that we get the right messenger. And that's the way that we can influence. And that's all about those relationships. I know who's connected in the network. And if I know, I'll get him. And once I get him, I get everybody. And so that, made the idea happen. But I think it also increased his power, because then he became associated with something that was really successful. And now he's in a new role. He's the dean of the school. So getting those champions is one of the most important ways we can use our power and influence.
For sure. I want to say, Alison, that I did take a power and influence class with some of your teammates or colleagues at UNC, and it was a fabulous, well-run program for people that want to learn more. I think that's a place that they can check out.
Absolutely.
What advice would you have for our listeners around ways to increase their individual power sources?
I focus a lot on building relationships. There's a couple aspects of building relationships. First, you can't build relationships with people who don't know you exist. So I would start by thinking about making sure people know you exist. And there's a phenomenon in psychology known as mere exposure. Familiar things are liked more. So if you think about your favorite song on the radio now, however much you like it, you didn't like it that much the first time you heard it. The repeated exposure has caused you to like it more. Well, that's true for people as well. So one of the ways to increase individual power is to just start to get your name out there. So what does that mean? Well, some things at work are mandated. I have to do this. It's part of my job. But other things might be discretionary. Volunteer to help somebody on a project or be part of a task force or a committee. And one of your criteria could be, who will I meet? This is how I always started my career, was who would I get to know? And they're going to now know who I am. Because if anything important happens, I want them to know me. I always say when you come to a meeting and you don't know the person next to you, introduce yourself with your first and last name, right? The repeated exposure, even if I'm not interacting with you in a deep and meaningful way. So that's step one. They know who I am. They've heard of me. And then invest value in the relationship. So we think about relationships and back to that American dream myth, right? I can do everything by myself. But what we know from psychology is that people like you more after they have helped you. So strategically asking other people for help is a relationship building tactic. Because if I help you, I have to rationalize to myself, why did I help you?
You already invested some energy and effort into helping them. So you want to see that effort come to life, right?
Exactly. So starting to think about the fact that it does, especially, and this is if you're talking about people who are starting out in their career and you might think, oh my gosh, like how could I possibly build relationships when I'm not the one with all the knowledge and all the expertise? I always say people's favorite topic is themselves. They will love to talk to you about what they've learned. And if you go in with a sincere curiosity and beginner's mind and say, help me understand how you've been successful here, that's one of the best ways we can build relationships. So in terms of individual power, to me, that's a really big category, the one of building relationships. But I think it sets up all the other different sources that we have.
Great. Let me ask you a follow-up question. You mentioned visibility. Pandemic is still not over. A lot of people are working from home. And even after the pandemic, we might not go back to the typical normal 5 days in the office dynamic. This new world will make visibility a little bit more challenging.
I think it absolutely will. And it's, who's going to suffer the most? The people who don't have a strategy for this. Because if you didn't have a strategy, just the fact that you were bopping around the office kind of brought you into contact with people. And so even though you weren't as strategic as you should have been, you won't be hurt by it. Now, the people who have the mentality of I'm just going to sit here and put my head down and do my work will start to be hurt by that. And so what I'd say is everyone should have a strategy for thinking about how do I create visibility, relationships, expertise. We should be doing that already. But let's say you didn't. No big deal. You can still build that in a virtual world. You have to think about, okay, well, what are my authentic ways that I want to build power? What am I trying to showcase expertise? Am I trying to go for likability? Am I trying to go for knowledge of the network? Whatever it is, you decide. And then I always tell people, what would you do if you were in the office, if you were face-to-face? Answer that question first. And now let's think of the best virtual analogy for that. So if you said, hey, I'd set up lunch meetings with people. Well, you can do a version of that, right? It's the virtual coffee or whatever. You have to work with what you have. But I think the real differentiator is you need a strategy. And if you have a strategy, you can pretty much work through any communication medium there is. If you don't have a strategy, sitting in your home is going to start to isolate you.
Excellent. And this is why I love this topic, Alison. It's kind of like exploring the world of wine. Like you never stop learning. There's so much.
It's depressing. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Yes. Now, what advice would you give to listeners around ways to increase their contextual power sources?
And the way I think about those differently, individual versus contextual, is individual can't be taken away from you, right? So if I replace you in this role, those sources that are tied with you are individual. But contextual is power that is inherent in the role itself. Meaning if I take you out of this role and I put another person in it, that person would then get these sources of power. In my experience, I'm curious to hear what you think. In my experience, in many organizations, the closer you are to where the money is made, the more power you have. So this is something you talk a lot about and think a lot about, of being in a high power group. Yeah. And that can differ what it means. But a lot of times it's the easier it is for me to see the role you play in generating revenue, the more powerful that group tends to be. So in terms of contextual power, one of the things I find really interesting is that I counsel a lot of people who are looking to move up in their career. I teach graduate students. I teach people who are, using their degree to get new jobs and to advance. But everyone always wants to talk to me about a promotion, right? I want to stay within my group and get a higher title. And that is a way, right? That's a path to contextual power. But the other thing to think about is the lateral move to a different group that moves you up. And people don't naturally think about that, right? Because they always think, I've got to get a higher title than the one I have. But that's not always the best way. And if you ask people to tell their stories that have been really successful and risen to the top rank of an organization, it's not often the case they just come in one group and work their way up. They actually zigzag a bit. And so thinking about that zigzag strategically as a way to increase your contextual power. Don't be afraid of the lateral move to a more powerful group or somewhere closer to where the money is.
Thank you for that explanation. So to make this a two-way conversation, Alison, I'll let you ask me a question.
Okay, a question. So, well, I'm curious about this sort of similar question to you. Obviously, you've had a lot of wide and varied professional experiences, across countries. How have you done this in terms of thinking about contextual power throughout your own career? How have you managed to find ways to increase it?
Yeah, it all happened with me coming into this new company and over time learning, like you said, where's the action happening? Where are the exciting projects? Typically, that is where you see a faster growth trajectory, more resources, interesting projects, etc. So if I'm not in that team, I start thinking, okay, how do I get to that team? And what has worked for me is, just being direct and honest. I typically talk to the leader of that team and I say, hey, listen, I'm very interested in joining your team. These are the type of activities that I can do for you to add value. This is my background. This is my track record. As a matter of fact, we're currently working together in this project, and I know that you like what you see. So, think about it. At the right time, I would love to be part of your team. And the 3 times that I have tried that, Alison, it has worked out. That is, for example, how I moved to Brazil when I was working with Cadbury. I saw Brazil as an exciting economy. There was a lot of buzz around it back in the day. And although the power magnitude might have been smaller, it was growing very fast. So there was a lot of, dynamics going there that I wanted to be part of. That's what I've done. I basically figured out where are the interesting teams that I want to join. I talked to the leader. I explained my value proposition. And in a matter of, months or a year or something like that, the door opens. And it has worked out that way.
I love that. I mean, there's so many things about that story that are good. One is the idea of that like a long runway, right? That you're planting a seed, not necessarily for now, but thinking about the future. And I think the idea that you're strategic and you're authentic. You can use these strategies without having to be any of those kind of negative connotations that you're saying, hey, I'm really excited about really great work that this company's doing, right? Cadbury, they're growing, they're changing. There's a lot of cool things to do there. That would be fun for me. I could add a lot of value. Let me think strategically about how to get myself there. And those two things go hand in hand. And I think I love that story.
Great. Thank you. So, Alison, each of our audience members is on their journey to success, trying to get to their champagne. What is the main thing you want our audience to remember when they think about why they should increase their power and influence?
This applies to everyone. As long as you have relationships you need to navigate, you need to figure out how to get people to want to say yes. And these are the tools in your toolkit that are going to help you do it.
Excellent. Professor Alison Fragale, thank you so much for joining me today. It was an awesome conversation in a very interesting topic. Thank you for joining me.
Of course, my pleasure. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you. So people, if you want to learn more about her, please visit www.alisonfragale.com or follow her on LinkedIn. Remember, everybody, you can and must take action to start unlocking the power of this principle in your life. It is a critical component of being an effective professional that gets the mission accomplished. Listen, power, influence, and politics is not my favorite topic, and playing it does not come naturally. But you and I need to get better at it. Sheer competence is not enough. You need a healthy level of performance in this topic. Powerlessness can derail you. You need to combine high performance with effective influence skills. The influence complements your abilities and helps convince others that your optimal idea is the winning idea to implement. I motivate you to learn more about this topic and become highly skilled at it. It might definitely be worthwhile making it a secondary spike when building expertise. Let's meet again in episode 11, when we will explore how to increase the effectiveness of your network, because you do need help from others and you also want to help others. I have another excellent guest lined up for you. Thank you for joining me in this episode. I hope you are inspired by this principle. So cheers to your success on your road to champagne. Please don't forget to visit roadtochampagne.com and join our mailing list to download the framework we are using. If you like this episode, please share it with your friends, colleagues, and classmates. Send your comments via the website's contact page and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Road to Champagne on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn.